Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Tuesday evening, the 26th of February 2019. And welcome Smaulgld mug stackers and game changers. Tonight's topic, Fed Chair Powell indicates no shift in monetary policy and repeats patience and data dependency. We're going to talk about what that means and give a bit of a recap on Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's testimony today before the Senate. I believe he goes tomorrow before the Congress. Let's take a look at what happened during the markets today. We'll go through some news, and then we will get into what Chairman Powell said and some of the reaction to it, and then we'll get your reaction to it as well. So the markets today were pretty much non-committal, and basically it reflected Jerome Powell's non-committal approach towards his testimony. The Dow Jones was down just about less than 0.1%, down 33 points to 26,057. The Nasdaq down pretty much flat, hardly down at all, down 5 points to 75.49. And the S&P 500 also pretty much flat, down to 27.93. Now let's take a look at the gold and silver markets. The big moves today were not in the gold silver markets. They were in the platinum and palladium markets. Platinum up about $9 or $10 and palladium up about 20 some odd dollars. Palladium at $15.43. Now that was a metal that was $300 when gold was about $1,200. And platinum at $8.59. And platinum had been 2-3 years ago at a higher price than gold. Now, platinum is starting to make some catch-up on palladium. The last couple of days, platinum has risen and palladium has risen, but palladium has risen at twice the rate of platinum. Yes, palladium has risen at twice the rate as platinum, even though platinum is starting to rise and is at $8.59. But as we mentioned, palladium nearly twice the price of platinum at the moment. Let's take a look at the gold and silver prices now. Gold price was essentially flat, up a little bit, but not really up too much at all, 62 cents. And it's up about another 50 cents in after hours. Right now it's trading at $13.28, still holding above that $1,300 mark. There are some saying that it could drop to $13.15 by the end of the week. I don't pay much attention to the chartists. I mean, the chartists will tell you that they are right, but I'm not convinced because if it was that easy, you would just pull out charts and trade and make money. I suppose people do that. I just don't believe in it. I could be wrong. I just haven't spent enough time on it. And anecdotally, when I look at when people point out charts and tops and bottoms, it often doesn't work out to be the case. But I have not, admittedly, done a full data analysis on charting. All right, and I'm also not very keen on most predictions because most predictions that I've seen and I've been able to document, they're not necessarily based on charts, have turned out not to be true. They're mostly based on hopium, and that's generally not hope is not a good strategy in predicting the prices, especially the precious metals, as we've seen the past 7-8 years. Now, silver price was up a little bit, up 2 cents to where it is right now. It's closed at $15.18 in the aftermarkets. It's still at $15.89, not $15.18, $15.89. Still trying to recapture that $16 mark. Held it for a couple of days, a couple of weeks ago, fell back and has been steadily trying to move up towards that. The gold-silver ratio still well above 83, and I expect it to remain elevated unless and until gold takes off beyond $1,400. Then I expect silver to play somewhat of a catch-up. And the rationale there is that actually gold has a much higher profile as a monetary metal, as an investment metal. You have central bank buying, and you have also 40-some-odd% of gold demand is for investment, whereas only 10-15% of silver's demand is for investment. Now, silver could rise absent some type of increase in investment demand if there is a big increase in its industrial demand. For example, increase in demand for electric cars, increase in... we have to talk about significant increases, not just these generic increases that people talk about because silver is so useful. No, it has to be something where there's something like a new Green Deal where there's mandated that you have to have more solar energy by a certain percentage, by a certain period of time, where manufacturers wouldn't even have the chance to even try to switch out the metals or even try to do some thrifting in a short period of time. That could put a short squeeze on the amount of silver available if you have something where there's some type of mandate for solar power, which we are having in California in 2020. New construction over a certain size is going to require solar panels. Now, I'm not sure how much of an impact that will have, and I haven't done the math, but something like that could actually drive silver higher absent a rise in the gold price. Generally, when gold rises as a result of investment demand, silver will follow when people realize that the gold-silver ratio is somewhat out of whack, given that silver still has some investment component and some monetary value. All right. Let's see what else happened in the gold and silver markets today. Then we'll move on to cryptos. Yeah, we saw this again. Central banks are buying gold. That is all I need to know. Narrative today from none other than Keith Neumeyer speaking to Kitco News. Now, there's two of these narratives which I don't subscribe to, that the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable. No, it's very sustainable, and we've seen for a long term why the gold-silver ratio has remained elevated, mostly because the gold-silver ratio used to be 16 to 1, 15 to 1, and 9 to 1 on the basis that both metals were monetary and governments essentially fixed them at that ratio, and it was necessary to keep them at that ratio. Today, the investment profiles and the demand profiles for gold and silver are substantially different, and that's why you don't have a 16 to 1 ratio. But that doesn't stop the silver people from coming out and saying it's unsustainable. They've been feeding that line out there for 10, 15 years, expecting that it's supposed to return to its natural ratio. So all a bunch of rubbish, as they say in England. Now, the latest is that central banks are buying gold, and that's been out there for a while, solely on the basis of when Kazakhstan and Russia were buying. Well, in 2018, we saw Poland, Hungary, India buy gold again for the first time in a long time for many of those countries. And now it's this whole central banks are buying gold. But again, the amount of gold that's being bought, I think it was 550, 600 tons, most of it bought by Kazakhstan and Russia, the central banks of Kazakhstan and Russia. And they buy from their own mining supply. So they're not really taking away from the global supply. And global mining production over the last few years has been about 3,600 tons. So when central banks buy, like Russia bought 272 tons last year, Kazakhstan bought about 50 tons. You know, you're talking about most of central bank buying is from those two countries. They've been buying consistently every month for years. Kazakhstan has bought gold for 75 months in a row now. We'll find out how much they bought in the next couple of days when they release their January numbers. But these other banks, you really can't count on them to continue to buy gold, but yet that doesn't stop the whole central bank purchases are buying gold and this is going to change the game. This is game over, game changer, because now central banks are buying gold, and that is all I need to know. The amounts that central banks are buying are not significant. They're not significant in the grand scheme of things, and who knows if they'll continue to have consistent buying going forward. The real demand for gold, physical gold, comes from Indian purchasers, Chinese purchasers, not central banks. But of course, the central banks are buying gold narrative is one that people can glob onto, because you can start to create all types of narratives. Central banks are buying gold. That is all I need to know. And they know what is coming, and they are prepared for a reset, and they are prepared to back their currency with gold. All nonsense. That's not what they're doing, but that is a narrative that is out there. All right, let's move on now over to the cryptocurrencies. Lots of news there today. We're seeing a little bit of a stabilization in the prices of the cryptocurrencies. Currently right now, Bitcoin pretty much flat at 37.79. Ethereum at 134. That's down 2%. Litecoin flat at 44.50, and Bitcoin Cash at 131. That's down about 2%. Let's take a look at some of the news, though, in the cryptocurrencies. These are important bits of news here. We're going to go through each one of them, but most of them deal with the idea of adoption. And there's this sense, this creeping adoption of Bitcoin, Litecoin, all the cryptocurrencies into the mainstream financial systems. And it happens, if you had mentioned where we are right now 4 years ago, people would have thought you're out of your mind. There's no way what I'm going to talk about today would even have been conceivable a few years ago. And now people are looking at it and saying, yeah, but it's not really widespread adoption. Well, let's take a look. This article here from CoinDesk, there's no crypto winter in Argentina. Now, they're talking about here about the average daily transaction volumes on a platform called Local Bitcoins, where people trade Bitcoin. Now, why do they trade Bitcoin in Argentina? Because the Argentine peso has never been worth anything for the last 50 years, and people like to use an alternative currency. Dollars can be used. Dollars are black market sometimes. It's hard also to get electronic transfers in and out of Argentina for dollars, but Bitcoin seems to be a bit easier, and they're having record transaction volumes in Argentina. We say, well, it's Argentina. Well, you have the same things going on in Venezuela. We saw yesterday Carlos Hernandez, a Venezuelan economist, mentioning how he and his family survive on transacting small amounts of Bitcoin that immediately get converted into bolivars into their bank account, and they can use that to spend to keep themselves in groceries and other necessities that they may have. Now, a couple of other things here. Nasdaq. Now, Nasdaq is very important, all of this crypto adoption, because they've recently, well, here's just an article. This has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about with the new Nasdaq indexes, but just an article in Nasdaq.com. Is Bitcoin headed for a bull run? Now, why would Nasdaq be promoting such a thing? Well, because Nasdaq has just recently released this latest index that they have. They're tracking Bitcoin index, they're tracking a Ethereum index. And why are they doing that? Well, they're going to issue products, derivatives, and so on off of this. They're not just doing this because they like to produce indexes for the sake of producing indexes. And we're seeing this now, and it's all crept on us very slowly. Google, Yahoo, if you type in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, you'll get a price chart and so on. And that's a big deal, that they realize they're accommodating where people are looking for. And it may not be 100% of the world or 50% of the financial world or even 10%, but there is significant numbers of people that follow the crypto markets, invest in the crypto markets, trade in the crypto markets, and therefore you're seeing that general accession to consumer demand there. And they also realize they can make money off of this as well. Here we go. Bitcoin, Ethereum indexes go live on Nasdaq's GIDS platform. So again, they're there. It's Bitcoin and Ethereum. Those are the two largest, and you got XRP, EOS, and Litecoin as well. All right, now here's another little trend here that we've had over the last couple of years. You're seeing major figures. We've seen the SEC chairman go to a high-profile crypto conference last year, put on by CoinDesk. This Hester Pierce, I keep wanting to call her Hester Prynne after the Scarlet Letter. And look at that, she's wearing a red, not a red letter, but she is wearing a red jacket there, Hester Pierce. She is a SEC commissioner. She voted in favor of a couple of, I think, the Bitcoin ETFs. Her colleagues voted them down, but there's a new person, a new commissioner on the panel, and he's in favor of Bitcoin ETFs. So we'll see where it goes. But then the CFTC, which is already approved of Bitcoin futures, they attend these conferences now. They're not there in a hostile, they're not there in a adversarial role. They're there to hear what's going on and also to lend their support and to give their opinions on what they need to see in order to have their regulatory stamp of approval. And that's something I think that people are saying is going to bring a lot of money into the space when you have this regulatory certainty, which you don't quite have yet here. A couple of other things. We always come up with these each and every day. Here's another one. Bank in Switzerland. Yesterday we talked about a bank in Liechtenstein offering crypto assets. Well, this Julius Baer Swiss bank is going to offer digital asset services. You're seeing a lot of traditional banks now offering trading platforms, offering digital storage, and we saw last night as well a consortium, I think 30 custodians in Europe looking to do something with storing crypto assets. They realize that there's money there. They want a piece of it. And finally, there's this other company here, Sophie. Now, there's a stock trading platform, but they're going to now launch cryptocurrency trading in partnership with Coinbase. So we're seeing these types of platforms where they realize, just like Fidelity realizes, just like TD Ameritrade realizes, that when they trade stocks, they realize that right now, currently, a small niche of people also trade cryptocurrencies, and they don't offer that. So that's why Fidelity and TD Ameritrade, Ericex will be offering crypto trading platforms within the next month or so, I believe. Then you have Backed, which we've talked about a few times here, which is also looking to launch its trading platform, probably the most ambitious of the bunch, because they also have a storage platform on Backed, and they also are looking to have a platform where you can also convert your cryptocurrencies into fiat digitally so you can spend those cryptocurrencies. All right, what else do we have? Well, in China, a couple of quick stories on China. This is a very interesting story, and it's not really just the Chinese story, but it kind of ties into the privacy issues that we have. Now, forget what you put online and what everybody sees, but when you go out into public, or even on Facebook, they can look at your facial recognition. They could tell who you are. When you're out in the public, we've seen in China, they have facial recognition, and they can shame people and say, look, we know who this person is. This person's a jaywalker. This person has bad credit. You know, the whole social credit thing. They have retinal scans. Well, now they actually have a way where your back could be turned to the camera. They may not be able to tell your face. They certainly can't scan your eye, but they're starting to work on gait recognition technology. And what is gait recognition? Well, everybody walks a certain way, and there you see Monty Python. That's John Cleese, the Ministry of Silly Walks, if I'll remember correctly. And people have a certain way of walking, way of strutting, swaggering, shuffling, whatever it happens to be, and they can essentially figure out who you are by the way you walk, even if your back is turned to the camera. Quite interesting, as Salivate Metal would say. Quite interesting indeed. All right, let's look now. And one last story. Now, this is something I've been covering for, I was going to say 15 years, but I haven't. But at least 5 years, or at least 3 years, about this whole narrative that the gold pumpers used to always promote, that the United States debt was unsustainable and China is smart and they are buying gold. And Sun Tzu says this and all this nonsense about how China and the BRICS are going to crush the dollar. And I've been pointing out that, well, that's a very nice theory. And the only reason they want to believe that is they just want the gold price to go up, and China became their gold buddy because they thought, if China could crush the dollar, and if the dollar goes down, then gold goes up and they're rich, and that's all they need to know. Well, on the way to that thought process, a lot of people have missed the fact that China, if you're going to criticize the United States for having a debt problem, well, you certainly can criticize China, because the Chinese debt bomb is even bigger than the United States. And then the apologists will say, well, they owe it to themselves. As we're going to see later, Jerome Powell says what I've been saying. It doesn't matter how much, whether you owe the debt externally, internally. If you owe a lot of debt, you owe a lot of debt, and it is not a good thing. And a lot of the Chinese debt, most of it, from the state-owned enterprises, state-owned banks, is owed in dollars. So that's not a good sign for China. And we've also seen how the amount of debt that they've rang up is basically they ring it up just to try to promote growth. Well, we know how that turns out here. But finally, we see from Mises.org. Now, I believe that a lot of people that follow Mises, a lot of the Austrian school proponents, they have been promoting this United States bad, China good, solely, I believe, on the basis that China is smart because they have gold. And Sun Tzu, they gave you that whole narrative about China and gold. And now it looks like finally they're publishing articles. Chinese bomb, are we really on the threshold of another global financial crisis? I mean, China has produced 60% of the world's debt in the last 3 to 5 years. You know, whatever happened to China to crush the dollar and gold back yuan? Yeah, well, I think people are finally realizing they've ignored this story for at least the last 3 or 4 years, solely because they've been so keyed into this whole China's their gold buddy and Sun Tzu and all this other nonsense, that finally they're realizing that China is in no better position than the United States when it comes to debt, and it's probably in a worse position. All right, let's see now. What else do we have before we get to our friend Jerome Powell? And I'm not going to play Moronica tonight because actually I didn't spend much time online today. I didn't see that many things that I'm sure things happened that were absolutely moronic. But on certain days when I don't see as many stories, I may not be able to pick up on the day's Moronica. So anyone can email me if they see something particularly stupid at smaulgld@gmail.com. Now, before we move on to Jerome Powell's testimony, let's just take a look at what's going on with Trump. He's in Vietnam. He's supposedly meeting with the premier of North Korea. And meanwhile, there's things going on back at home. Now, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, he was talking, I forget, he was at some of these little meetups, and he was saying that he thinks Barr is going to do the right thing. We can trust him to do that. He's got a lot of experience. Not quite sure how that's all going to work out, but it looks like Mueller's either going to present the report, and there's nothing that says in the special counsel, as saying that information, whatever the special counsel produces, not the independent counsel, this is the special counsel, whatever they produce has to be made public. And it's quite possible that if there's nothing in there that requires any type of indictment or public action, then maybe the findings will not be made public. And of course, the Democrats want to see all that information, and it's not quite certain as to what will happen. Now, Chairman of the House, I think it's the Foreign Intelligence Committee, the one that Adam Schiff is on, he's saying, well, they're going to sue to get it, and then they're going to want to see it, and if they don't like what's in there, they're going to conduct their own investigation. It's not sure how that's all going to work out, but here's a very interesting development, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, if you think this one through logically, you would think this is probably not going to work out the way some people might think it is. So Michael Cohen, former attorney to Donald Trump, who flipped and had his house and his office and his hotel room raided, and when they raided everything, and I'm not sure what the basis for that raid was, but they certainly found a lot of things on him that were not flattering and indeed criminal. Tax evasion, not reporting income. And one of the things they got him to plead to when he pled guilty to his tax evasion, and well, I think he made a misstatement on a loan application, but he also said that he had committed some type of election fraud by making a payment, and that Donald Trump was the unindicted co-conspirator. Now remember, just because somebody pleads guilty to something, that doesn't mean that the person that you plead guilty to it with is also guilty. There wasn't a examination of the facts and a determination that Michael Cohen was guilty of a campaign finance violation. Just because he pled guilty to it doesn't mean that Trump is guilty of it as well. However, what's interesting now is he is done with cooperation with Mueller, and he's made his plea. And if he wasn't done, they wouldn't have made his plea, and he's set to go to jail. And the other thing he was found guilty of was he lied to Congress. Okay, now the interesting thing here is now he is going to return to Congress. Now this doesn't make much sense because Congress should not want to welcome somebody that lied to them. But in any event, they're going to have him there because presumably he's going to go there and accuse Donald Trump of criminal conduct. Now, it's interesting that he doesn't have a gag order on him because it's part of an ongoing investigation. He really shouldn't be talking more than he's already spoken to special counsel Robert Mueller. So if he does have additional information, I don't think he does, because if he did, he would have already given it to Robert Mueller as part of his plea deal, and that would already be part and parcel of Robert Mueller's case. So for him to go now to the Congress and give information which, if it's new, I think Mueller would be furious, because why didn't he give it to him as part of his plea deal. So I'm not quite sure he's going to go there with anything new. And then he's going to have the issue that he's in front of a Congress which he's lied to. So if he does give any new testimony, why would anyone believe them? Because he lied to them last time. But I think we'll know tomorrow how this is shaking out. And obviously you're going to have the Democrats fawning over him and the Republicans assailing his character. And it'll make for good theater tomorrow, I'm sure. And I think he's there for a couple of days. Now, I'm not sure what is televised, what isn't. Not even sure what the purpose of him testifying is, if he has indeed been thoroughly raked over the coals. I mean, he did have all of his documents confiscated. He did undergo an intense investigation, I would imagine, by the special counsel. So I'm not sure why he needs to show up to Congress. But apparently, I guess he wants to go there, and I think he's trying to do some face saving. I'm not sure what the purpose of him showing up is, but we'll have to see how that all shakes out, and we will report on it. All right, now let's move on to the topic of the evening. What happened with the Fed today? Now, before we talk about the policy, whether the Fed's going to raise rates, not raise rates, continue with this balance sheet wind down, the most interesting thing I think he said, and it's typical, is he said the nation's debt is unsustainable. That is something we don't know. I mean, this is obvious, and it's not just the Fed that's saying this. Everyone says it, and yet no one has owned it. No, and the Fed, this is not their issue in their mind. This is the Congress's issue. Of course, that didn't stop the Fed from doing QE and printing $4 trillion. But of course, that was everyone has their own reasons for extending the debt. Either financial crisis, you need Social Security, you need Medicaid, you need to enhance the military, whatever it is, we need to pay for this program, that program. There's always a reason to extend the debt ceiling, and no one wants to address it. And Powell's there saying, yep, it's unsustainable. Not my job. It's not his job either. All right, let's see some of the things that he said. And first of all, with respect to the balance sheet, looks like, the balance sheet's over $4.1 trillion. They'll probably get it down to 3.7, then they're going to stop. So they're not going to really reduce the balance sheet, and they're not really going to normalize interest rates. Now, they did reduce the balance sheet a little bit. They sold off some of their assets, or they rolled off some of their assets when they became due. And they did raise interest rates off of 0 up to about, 2.25%. But it looks like all that's on hold, and that's about as far as they can go, because they don't want to put the country back into a recession, or they don't want to piss off Donald Trump, who's trying to pump up the stock market for whatever reason. It looks like 2019, absent some type of economic expansion, noticeable expansion, that they're not going to raise interest rates anymore, and they're going to stop even winding down the balance sheet. And he says that could happen this year. What else did Powell have to say today? Well, I had an interesting exchange. Forgot who it was with. This one I did see live. They were asking him, your dual mandate is full employment, price stability, and the senator was asking him, what does full employment mean? Yeah, it's wonderful. Everybody gets a job, but everybody has a minimum wage job. What good is it? And Powell gave a good answer. He basically said, look, monetary policy can impact full employment, but it really can't address wage growth. And then he started saying, we need other tools, and I hope it didn't seem to go very far. He didn't say which tools. The last thing I think you need is to give the Fed more tools. In fact, the Fed never used to have the full employment mandate. That came about in 1978. So I'm not sure we want to give the Fed more tools to try to figure out how to boost wages. Now, of course, the Congress can boost wages simply by enacting a minimum wage law. I'm not sure that's the best thing either. But, there's a lot of pressure being put on the Fed that they're supposed to be in charge and fix the entire economy, not just get people jobs, but they can make sure that people have a living wage. Anyway, no Bernie tonight. Bernie Sanders. Now, he's running for president, and thankfully that's very good, because we will have lots of fun doing our Bernie impressions
Because the millionaires and the billionaires and the 1%, they got all the money, they got all the food, and that's not a good thing. And we're going to make sure that they pay the fair share.
We're going to have a good time with Bernie this year for sure. All right, now, the main point about Powell is patience. That's the new code word, patience, data dependency. And here he is. Powell justifies a patient central bank on rate hikes, which means they're not going to raise rates unless the stock market booms, another 400 or 500 points, and it looks like GDP is heading above 3%. But otherwise, I think that they're done on that. What else do we have here? Now, if you remember yesterday, Janet Yellen trashed Donald Trump. She said, I don't think he understands the difference between the Fed's policy of stable prices and full employment. She basically said Donald Trump doesn't even know what the Fed is there for. Forget that he even understands economics. And she said he just doesn't understand. And then one of the senators asked Powell today, do you agree with former Fed Chair Yellen's assessment? He says, I won't have any comment on that for you. Which he didn't say Janet shouldn't have said that. He didn't say she was wrong. He just says, I'm not going to comment on that, which probably means he probably somewhat shares her point of view. Here's a point that Powell made, which is a point I've been making. He said the deficits don't matter for countries that borrow in their own currencies is just wrong. Of course they matter. That's the same nonsense that we owe it to ourselves when we talk about Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. If you Americans that are the people that excuse other countries for running up massive deficits in their own currencies, they don't excuse the U.S. for that. They say, look, we have to borrow money to pay for Social Security, Medicaid. No, what's the big deal? We owe it to ourselves. No, of course not. Debt is debt. There's shades of debt, but you can't escape the fact. You can't just say because you borrowed in your own currency, it's not an issue. I was happy to see Chairman Powell. I do agree with him on that debt is debt, and you just can't excuse it. And then the last thing, which I'm not a big fan of, what he talked about, there was another senator. His name was Patrick Toomey. I think he's a Republican senator. He was basically saying to him, look, you guys are big fans of inflation, and he made the point that inflation is generally a much bigger harm to the economy than deflation, and that the Fed spends a lot of its time trying to create inflation. And Powell and the Fed has come out and pretty much said, well, 2% inflation is what our target is, but we've only been able to hit that 2% during, quote, good times, and then we're not able to hit it other times, so we may want to try to push the inflation rate higher during good times. And this senator, Republican Senator Pat Toomey, says you got to be careful about that. But it seems the Fed really likes inflation. They actually believe that inflation drives growth, and they want more of it. So that about does it. Let's see what you guys are thinking, what you guys are saying over in the comments about just what happened today with Powell or anything else you may want to talk about. Let's see. Am I missing the comments here? I've got Pablo here. I've got Ann. I got Joe. Bob the Monk says Powell was walking on eggshells today. Yes, indeed he was. He spoke very carefully. And then Pablo says that tomorrow the House is going to give him a grilling, and I think that's true. I don't know what type of grilling they're going to give him, but okay, here the comments are just starting to roll, and I missed most of them. Okay. Tossing Molotov says Bitcoin heading down. Is it really heading down? I mean, it had ratcheted up to almost 4,200. Did go down about 3,600. The last couple of days, I believe it's stabilized. No, right now it's at 3,784. So it's basically doing nothing. Yeah, Bob the Monk says Bitcoin at about 3.8. That's right. Ann's a big fan of this theta. I don't know what that is, but she's been talking about that in the comments. All right. Hit the button, says Ann. Taylor Collins, funny. If they lower rates at just 2.5%, is that what it's at? Yes. Fragility much. Yeah. Well, Taylor, you're right. I mean, they don't really have much room. You have to give them credit. in their game, they did manage to raise rates to 2.5% when many commentators on all sides of the aisle said they couldn't raise rates. Some said they could never raise rates and the next move was going to be negative. I was on record, still on record in 2015 and 16 saying they would raise rates and they would raise them. As I said, they could never normalize them, but they would go as far as they could. And I predicted they'd get to about 2%. And they got a little higher than that on the basis that they need this higher interest rates in case there is a recession. They want to lower rates. Also, in order to keep demand for treasuries, they have to pay a positive rate of interest. They can't go to negative rates like the EU or Japan or Bank of England. They have to be out in front of that, and they want to appear prudent. So I always thought they would raise rates, and they've done exactly what I thought. A little bit more. I think they snuck in an extra rate hike or two, but I think now they're pretty much done. And Taylor said that's why you need an exit strategy. You can't just buy and hope it goes to the moon. I guess you're talking about cryptos there. All right. Taylor, how about Elon Musk's tweet about Tesla production numbers violating orders of the SEC? I am stunned that this guy gets away with what he gets away with. He openly defies the SEC. When he came out and made those statements that, yeah, I'm thinking of taking the company private at $400 and we already got a deal signed and there'd been no board discussion on this, and he basically got a slap on the wrist. I'm just surprised that a company that makes no profits has been out there for years and has a CEO who is not playing by the rules and is openly flaunting them, that the market still assigns a multi-billion-dollar market cap to a company that loses money. We see every couple of months one of these Teslas blows up after it hits something. Their production numbers don't seem to be very good. I'm just shocked that and again, this isn't investment advice. I'm not long or short Tesla. I have nothing to do with it. But I'm just surprised, and this is an indication of the market the way it is, that you can have a multi-billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar market cap, with a company that seemingly isn't worth much because it doesn't make any profit. And not only does it not make a profit, the CEO seems intent on self-destruction. He goes on, it's like a Joe Rogan, and smokes dope. I mean, what kind of CEO goes on a podcast? I mean, unless he's running a marijuana company, I don't see why you would go on to a podcast and smoke marijuana and drink whiskey. It's just not the right impression, I don't think. Anyway. Okay, what else do we have here? Yeah, popular opinion. Matt Gaetz Twitter commented Cohen was harsh. Now, they're trying to say that he's witness tampering. I saw quickly what Matt Gaetz said. I think he is a congressman from Florida, Republican. Apparently he has some inside knowledge or dirt on Cohen, and he was threatening that he's going to bring it up during the testimony. I actually think it's going to be a disaster what goes on there, because you're going to have the Democrats wanting to get the guy to say anything about Trump, and then you're going to have the Republicans trying to paint the guy out to be the biggest miscreant on the planet. So we'll see what happens. Now, best silver to stack in Norway. You won't believe how it is up here. Monopoly.com. Not sure what that means. For Scandinavians, Rioni says, which is the safest bullion to invest in? Philharmonics, Maples, Britannia, or bite the dust on 5x over spot on the national mints? Mint gevertet nor. Sales versus Smaulgld sit nor. Yeah, he's speaking Norwegian there. I don't know what Smaulgld sit. Huset is house in Swedish and Norwegian, and mintverket.no is .Norway. I don't know what the safest silver to invest in Norway. I'm sure you know more than we do about Norway. Nice country, though. All right, Carl Joseph DeMarco apologizing for showing up late. Got good manners there, Senor DeMarco. Ready for Trump to collude with Putin by invading Venezuela and ousting Putin's friend Maduro. Yeah, think about that. Philip Kennedy, I bet a guy at work that he couldn't do any push-up. He confidently dropped down, did 2.5, then fell on his face. He got up and swaggered over his performance. He really showed me. I'm not sure what kind of work you have there, Mr. Kennedy, where you can do push-up contests at work, but enjoy it. How much did you have to pay him? Okay, considering Reunit. Considering what you mentioned here, Smaulgld.com dash Norwegian dash. Okay, this looks like I gotta click on this link here. Now this is a redirect. Ah, I know what he's looking at. I had done a report a couple of years ago on, this is August 26, 2016. Norway's central bank files for confidential treatment of its U.S. equity holdings. Now, Norway has a sovereign wealth fund that runs through their central bank, and I'm looking at this link here. And at the time, they held a decent amount of gold and silver mining shares. I haven't updated this, so I don't know what they hold now. But our friend from Norway here is saying that would love to hear what your thoughts on this chime in all. Actually, whatever their thoughts are on that is probably irrelevant because I should probably update that. That's from 2016. I don't know what the Norwegian government now holds. And also, since they file for confidential treatment, it looks like at the time when I made that report, they filed for confidential treatment and they got it, and it allowed them to delay the reporting of their holdings by a year. So in 2016, you get 2015 holdings. They're really not much use to look at what they have a year later because they could have sold everything by the time you're looking at the report. All right. Pablo Pena Lewis, grilling by the House. Powell will be put on the spot. Statements, a few references to Trump, I bet. Could be. Scott Nations. All right. All right. Well, that about does it for tonight. Remember to join us each and every night. Around this time, we take a look at the economics, cryptocurrencies, gold, silver, and any politics that might be relevant. I'm give you a advance notice of what's going on this weekend. Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld will include Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld and SD Bullion. We'll have on James Henry Anderson. And I've also just been invited for an interview with SGT Report. I think that is sometime next week, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. Also, please consider, if you're going to buy gold or silver, it's not investment advice that you do so. Please consider buying through the Smaulgld links, especially from SD Bullion, Money Metals Exchange, and Golden Eagle Report. The links are below this BitChute, this YouTube. They're also on the Smaulgld website. Smaulgld gets a small commission when you do buy your gold and silver through those links, and I do want to thank, there's been significant activity on those links recently, so thank you very much for that. And also, please continue to be generous in supporting the channel, and I'm going to give you that link there if you're interested in donating via Bitcoin, Litecoin, Patreon. I'm going to add StreamServe, I think it's called. There's another. Some people did not want to donate via Patreon. I can understand that, but I don't have that set up yet. I'll probably get that done in the next couple of days, and you can also send checks or other items of value to Smaulgld, LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire, 0382. Or you can make a one-time donation via PayPal, and then it's just paypal.me/Smaulgld.com. And don't forget, if you haven't got your Smaulgld mug, what are you waiting for? Plenty of Smaulgld mugs, different sizes, shapes, Smaulgld Classic, Super Classic mugs. Those ship directly from Smaulgld headquarters. Those are the ones you see on the screen. The Super Classic to the left. They ship out priority shipping. The price is $23.99 for the Super Classic, $19.99 for the Classic. However, that includes the priority shipping, which is worth about $7 to $10 depending on where you are in the continental U.S. So I'm really not marking up the mugs that much at all. You can also buy your Smaulgld beer steins, espresso mugs, pet balls over at the Smaulgld shop at Zazzle.com. All the information, go to Smaulgld.com, and you can check out your buying options of Smaulgld mugs. So I do want to thank everyone for joining me. Editor, didn't Powell talk about price targets? I think he did, and there was an exchange about whether they should have them or not. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, that's it. So I want to thank everyone for joining me again tonight, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. Muchas gracias. Grazie mille. Dankeschön. And taxi me get for a Norwegian friend. Adios.